who have just joined us this week, we invite you and thank you also. So we have these talks every week, and we've had many great personalities speaking, such as His Holiness Sachinanda Swami, His Grace Nanda Krishna Prabhu, Grace Vishal Prabhu is on this call also, and His Grace Sudipal Prabhu. And this week we have a very esteemed speaker who is speaking on the topic of victim mentality. That is His Holiness Bhakti Goswami. So for those who don't know about Bhakti Goswami, he took to spiritual life in 1980, and he has been a great leader within the Krishna consciousness movement since 1997. And he's also helped to create great foundation and supportive mood within Russia. And this has been seen by a award that was given to Maharaj on July 1st, 2010. This award was for his contribution in strengthening Russian-Indian friendly relations and for his contribution to the popularization of spiritual culture, literary heritage of India. So we all hope you really take this opportunity to absorb Maharaj's great knowledge and advice for us today. And if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to write them down on the chat. For those who want to ask their questions, write them down in the chat. And at the end of the session, we will call out your names, unmute you, and you can ask your question. If you do feel shy to speak, then you can always privately message myself with your question, and we will ask the question for you. Also, because of time, we may not be able to answer all questions. So if there are questions which are very similar, then we'll combine them and ask them, and we'll get a nice rounded answer for you. So without further ado, we invite His Holiness Bhakti Goswami to speak to us on this topic, and I hope you will enjoy and absorb. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'm very happy to meet with you in this virtual space on Zoom during this time of coronavirus. And I think it's a very appropriate topic which was given to me by the organizers of this program, victim mentality. First of all, because it's very prominent in general in human society. Second of all, because it's very prominent specifically in this day and age. Because everyone is trying to blame somebody else for his problems or failures. And there's always somebody to be blamed. It could be the government, it could be other people, it could be spiritual organization like ISKCON. There's one more advantage for all the ISKCON members. They can blame their spiritual masters. That's also a great opportunity, which is unique for us. It's very much common to blame others. And in this little talk, I want to examine this propensity and the roots of this propensity, and moreover, the consequences, very ferocious consequences of this very natural human propensity to blame others for his faults, for his failures, for his problems, for his pains and sufferings. And to introduce this talk, or to actually give the life to this talk, I will read the verse number 50 from the 23rd chapter of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is entitled The Song of the Avanti Brahmana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshva Bhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Yam Pravrajantam Anupetam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayana Virahakatara Juhava Putreti Tanmayatayo Taravo Vinedus Tam Sarvabhuta Hridayam Munimanatosmi. So we will read this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Janastu hetu sukha dukkhayos chet kim atmanas chatra hi bhomayostat jihvam kvachit sandasati swadadbhis tat vedanayam katamaya kupyet. Translation. If you say that these people who are the cause, are the cause of my happiness and distress, then where is the place of the soul in such conception? This happiness and distress pertain not to the soul, but to the interactions of material bodies. If someone bites his tongue with his own teeth, at whom he can become angry in this suffering. Purport. Although bodily pleasure and pain are felt by the soul, one must tolerate such duality, understanding it to be a creation of one's own material mind. If one accidentally bites his own tongue or lip, he cannot become angry and pull out his own teeth. Similarly, all living beings are individual parts and parcels of God and thus non-different from each other. All of them are meant to serve the Supreme Lord in spiritual equality. If the living beings give up their master's service and instead quarrel among themselves, they will be forced to suffer by the laws of nature. If the conditioned souls establish artificial relationship of affection based on the material body and having nothing to do with God, then time itself will destroy their relationship and they will be subjected to further sufferings. But if the individual living entity understand each other to be of the same family and having connection with the Supreme Lord, their mutual friendship will develop. Thus, one should not exhibit anger that will be harmful to oneself and others. Although the Brahmana was receiving kind offerings of charity from some people and being harassed and beaten by others, he denied that these people were the ultimate cause of his happiness and distress, for he was fixed on the platform of self-realization beyond the material body and mind. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Janastu hetu sukha dukkhayos chet kim atmanas chatra hi bhaumayos tat. Jihvam kvachit sandasati swadadbhis tat vedanayam katamaya kupyet. If you say that these people are the cause of my happiness and distress, then where is the place of the soul in such conception? This happiness and distress pertain not to the soul, but to the interactions of material bodies. If someone bites his tongue with his own teeth, at whom he can become angry in his sufferings. So this very beautiful and instructive chapter of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam starts from a very important question asked by Uddhava, or rather from a very radical statement made by Lord Krishna himself. In the previous chapter, the chapter number 22 of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna is explaining the illusory nature of soul's bondage. This is a very difficult point to understand. Asanga hi ayam purushaha. Upanishads say that Purusha, living entity, spirit, soul, is asanga. It's not really connected with matter. It's not has really anything to do. It doesn't have anything to do with matter, with material body. And nevertheless, we see how strong is our attachment to matter, how strong is our attachment to body, how strong is our attachment to our material relationship, and how difficult it is to get free. And therefore, it's very difficult point to understand, because the point is being here that we're already free. We're not really connected. And all the connections which we feel and which we experience practically on a every minute basis is illusion. So how to understand this illusion, which is so much real and so much prominent in our consciousness? And therefore, Lord Krishna, in explaining this philosophy to Uddhava, goes into the great length by trying, giving different examples to facilitate our understanding how the soul is not really connected with the body, but still, nevertheless, is somewhat connected with the body, and what is the nature of this connection. Lord Krishna gives a very important and beautiful example. He says that the emotions which the soul experiences, and the soul does experience emotions. It is said by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita that bhaktritva, the experiencing capacity, is within the soul. The kartritva, the agency, the ability to act, is within the material nature. But the bhaktritva, the experiential capacity, the capacity to experience different emotions, is within the soul. So how is it if the activity is being done by something, and how we experience something which we are not really doing? So Lord Krishna gives a very beautiful example. He says that in a similar way as on the stage, when we see some performance of the stage and somebody is beautiful, is singing very beautifully or dancing very beautifully, then the audience, becoming more and more involved into this performance, starts experiencing the same emotions. And we all know, you know, people are sitting there in their armchairs, but at the same time their legs are dancing and they start, you know, moving fro and in the rhythm of the music, and basically they're dancing inside. So they're being sucked in this performance, and they experience the same thing which is being experienced, or even sometimes stronger, according to the rasa theory. According to the rasa theory, the rasa can only be experienced by the spectator, not by the performer. At least some theorists of rasa are of this opinion, that performance of the play, they cannot experience emotion to the fullest extent. It's only available to the spectators, to the witnesses of these emotions. So Lord Krishna gives this example, and this example is supposed to understand as the nature of our experience. We, the soul, are witnessing all the emotions produced in the mind, all the different waves of emotions, very powerful energy of emotions. And emotions are nothing but energy in motion. The English word emotion is coming from the Latin word emovere, from the Latin root emovere, which means to move. So emotion is the very strong dynamic force within our mind, and we all know, if we are moved by some emotion, if it's a strong emotion, be it the emotion of anger or emotion of fear or emotion of lust or emotion of I don't know what else, grief, we become completely subdued by this emotion, overwhelmed by this emotion. We cannot actually do anything, help anything to overcome this emotion. It's such a strong force which carries away our consciousness. Our whole consciousness is completely sucked in this emotion. So Lord Krishna gives this example to give us some understanding that the soul, being the witness within the mind, the soul is witnessing what is going on in the mind, on the stage of the mind, and identifies with this very beautiful performance. As much as the spectator of the performance is identifying easily. It's called in the rasa theory sadaranyikaran, when we become identical with what is going on the stage. And we all know, we all have experience, if we see the cinema, some shadows and colors are produced on the white screen, and they're moving in the white screen. But somehow or other, we are sitting there and we are experiencing very strong forces inside. Reflected emotions from the screen, fear or anger or love or something else. So this is exactly the situation of the soul, and but Lord Krishna does not stop there. He gives actually a series of other similes to explain what is going on exactly when we identify with this body and with these emotions and with this mind, and why it is a vicious circle, why it is so difficult to break free from these shackles of the identification with the body. We all know that, I may be sitting there in the cinema, but when it becomes too much, I just, get up and walk out. Or I just eat my popcorn and become relaxed. It's somewhat easy to distance oneself from what is going on the screen or on the stage. But when it comes to the stage of the mind, it's much more difficult. Sometimes we would like to walk out, but it's not possible. We're just sitting there completely, chained to this armchair of our identification. And we cannot help but to see the whole horror movie till the end, which is not always a happy end. On the contrary, it's always an unhappy end. We die and we witness our own death and we become horrified how it is possible that I'm dying. It's not possible. And, the whole drama evolves or interrupts at this moment. So therefore, Lord Krishna gives us some other very interesting hints what's going on. And it's very important to understand immediately after this verse, number 53, where he explains, gives this simile, he gives three similes in the next two verses, 54 and 55 of 22nd chapter. And he says, I will not read Sanskrit because I believe there is not many people who understand it anyway. So he says, the soul's material life, his experience of sense gratification is actually false or descendant of Dasharha. Just like trees' appearance of quivering when the trees are reflected in agitated water, or like the earth's appearance of spinning due to one's spinning his eyes around, or like the world of fantasy or dream. When Krishna gives 4 examples in a row, there must be some very important message behind these examples. These examples cannot explain the same thing. Of course, sometimes to drive the point home, he may give the same example again and again and again and again to stress the point. But it's not the case in this particular story which we're reading with you. This first example which I gave and explained already of identification with the play of the mind is a general example. But the 3 other examples in the next 2 verses are explaining different aspects of our false identity. Our false identity or identification with the body, mind, and our emotions, which are there in the mind. They are basically, it's called false ego, but false ego has 3 very important aspects. These 3 important aspects of false ego I explained in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam by Lord Kapiladev in his explanation of Sankhya philosophy, where he says that false ego has 3 aspects, which is kartritva, karanatva, and karyatva. Kartritva, karanatvam, and karyatvam. Kartritva is one aspect of false ego, false identity. I'm the doer. And yeah, I will explain a little later what it means in more details. I'm the doer. I'm the doer of my activities. I'm, the achiever of success in this life. I'm either, basically, there are 2 aspects of this. Either I'm a sufferer or I'm an enjoyer. I'm the doer of my actions, or I'm a failure. So it's very much connected with this victim sort of mentality. I am the failure and I have to blame others. But we will explain in more details a little later. Let's first understand how our false identity works. This false ego is very strong fellow, and it has these 3 aspects. First aspect is identification with the doership. And for that, to explain the falsity of this conception that I'm the doer, Lord Krishna gives the first example. The first example is basically when the boat is moving on the river and we are in the boat, we see the trees, and it seems to us, it appears to us that the trees are moving. Or the trees are standing still, and we look in the reflection of the trees in the water, and the water is flowing, and it appears to us that the reflection, the trees are moving. In any case, either whatever explanation we will take from the Sanskrit, either way, the first explanation with the boat is better because it's more clear. what is going on here, we transfer the quality of action into something which is actually not acting. The trees are not moving. There is no action in the trees. They are standing still on the bank of the river, but we look at them, and because of the illusion, because we are moving ourselves, there is some disconnection there. Okay. Because of this illusion, because we are moving, but we are looking at something which is not moving. It seems like that this is what is being being moved, or what is moving. So in the similar way, we are not acting. In the material world, the soul is not acting, the body is acting. The soul is inactive, but this inactive soul assumes the qualities of action of the body. This carte territoire, which is being performed by the body, the agency, the body, the material nature is moving, but we think I'm the doer, I'm doing activity. So that's the significance of the first example of non-moving trees, which seem to us that they're moving. The next example is even more beautiful and even more important for us to understand. The next example is that when you start moving, when you start rotating around, or you just rotate your own head, and then you stop, and your eyes are still moving, and it looks to you as if the whole earth is moving, whereas the earth is not moving, it's your eyes are moving. So it seems to be the same example, but it's not the same example, and therefore Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives another example which makes it more clear what is meant by Krishna while he is explaining or giving this simile or this metaphor for us to understand. He gives another example, perhaps a little more easy for us to relate. If somebody becomes crazy or possessed by this ghost, he starts manifesting different qualities, and we'll look at him and we think that this is the quality of the person, whereas this is not the quality of the person, this is the quality of the ghost who possessed himself. So the second example is the example of the second aspect of false ego, which is karanatva, when we identify with our qualities. The first is general identification. I identify myself, or I think myself, I'm the doer, I'm the doing. The second identification is that how we think about ourselves. I'm a very kind person. I'm a very generous person, or I'm a very cruel person, and I'm a very determined person, and I'm a very strong person, I'm this, I'm that. We always attribute different qualities which we have, the qualities of the mind, to ourselves. And this becomes the strengthening, another chain which keeps us bound to this body and to these experiences. It's basically, oh, I'm very sad, I'm a very sad person. And, if you repeat it enough number of times, you become sad. And you will not be able to break free from this quality. You will always be sad. You will always see the world through this lens, lens of the qualities, Or sometimes people, oh, I'm very naive. Yeah. You repeat it enough number of times and you become naive. It's basically a game which we are playing with ourselves, and therefore Krishna gives this second example about the eyes rolling. The rolling is the quality of the eyes, and it's not by chance that Krishna gives this example with the eyes. basically we see the whole world through the eyes of our qualities, which are not our qualities. We are pure spirit soul. Everyone is kind, but everyone is beautiful. Everyone is absolutely amazing. But because we have this strong identification with the mental qualities which we acquired during our sojourn into this material world, we become that. I become greedy or angry person, or whatever person, sad person, or joyful person, enthusiastic. I'm very enthusiastic, and I'm always playing this role of being enthusiastic. Yeah. I'm bubbling with enthusiasm. But this is illusion. Too much identification with this doesn't help, because it just becomes really the eyes through which we see the world, and we see the whole world through these eyes. And as much as the person who is rotating around himself see that the whole world is moving, and in the same way we see the same qualities in other people, and we relate to these other qualities, and we basically reinforce by seeing or interacting with the world through these qualities or through this mind. We're reinforcing our false ego. As much as interacting with the world through this quality of kartritva, I'm the doer, I'm achiever, I'm this, and I will achieve success, or I'm victim. I'm very nice, look at me. Everyone is just so bad and mistreating me, and I look at me, just look at me, just love me. So there's two ways of how we want to attract attention of other people, either being the hero and achiever, or being the victim. The second one is easier, therefore it's more common. To achieve something, you really have to work hard. To be victim, you don't have to do anything. You just have to always point out, see how beautifully I am suffering. See how unjustly I was treated. See how bad other people are. See how I'm suffering. Just see at me, see at me. So this is another aspect of false ego. And what I want to say, and this is actually what Krishna is implying by saying this, when we interacting through these qualities, we are more or less reproducing this false ego, reinforcing false ego. We become like this. We do become like this. Yes, we do become stingy or angry or sad person, and we cannot break free. Really cannot break free. So, and the third example which Krishna gives in these two verses, 54 and 55, is about bhoktritva, is about experiencing capacity, where he says that sometimes one see a dream, he's in a dream, and he sees in a dream that he's suffering. In reality, he's not suffering. He's laying on a cozy bed in an AC room in a 5-star hotel. But in his mind, there is some turmoil is going on, and he really, identifies himself with all these emotions, and it really seems to him that he is suffering. So again, by giving the general example of identifying what is going on in the mind, Krishna elaborates on this by giving these 3 examples. That our false ego is fooling us, is actually cheating us by developing this 3 sort of identity, identifying with the body, with the activities of the body, with this action, agency, identifying with the body, with the qualities of the body and with the qualities of the mind, and karyatva, identifying with the experiences of this body. Whatever the body is experiences, suffering or enjoying, or the mind is experiencing. We identify with this and we say, yeah, this is me. This is what I am. And therefore, these 3 very important examples is necessary for us to understand the three aspects of false identity and how this false identity binds us, how the false identity keeps us bound to this material body, material mind, and actually material life in general. The repetition of birth and death when we cannot break through. And therefore, Krishna more or less concludes in the verses 58 and 59, he concludes that one has to understand very much this game of the mind, or this game of the false ego, rather. The false ego which identifies with the mind. And one has to, instead of reinforcing false ego, interact with this material world in such a way that would ultimately weaken and destroy false ego, destroy false identity. So the program, the karmic program, what we call karma, or what astrologers will tell us, is more or less this program of the false ego, which is the sum total of some scars accumulated during our traveling in this material world. And we are enacting this program in different way, displaying all these qualities. But the problem with the karma is that it's a vicious circle. I have the false identity, and I strengthen this false identity. I basically reconfirm this false identity every day, every minute of my life. I am like this. Yes, I am suffering. Yes, this is me. So Krishna says there is only one way to break free from this vicious circle, is to start behaving or interacting with the material world, with the people in the material world, and first and foremost, with the events of our life, with the happenings of our life, in a certain way which will, instead of reinforcing our false ego, will ultimately destroy false identity. And that's what Krishna explains in these verses 58 and 59. Even though neglected, insulted, ridiculed, or envied by bad men, or even though repeatedly agitated by being beaten, tied up, or deprived one's occupation, spat upon, or polluted with urine by ignorant people, one who desires the highest goal of life should, in spite of all these difficulties, use his intelligence to keep himself safe on the spiritual platform. So Krishna gives a very radical and drastic statement. He says, instead of trying to, identify with all these bad occurrences which are there in everyone's life, fortunately for us, instead of rejecting them, instead of revolting against them, instead of basically revolting against God, we should embrace them, we should welcome them, and we should use them as an opportunity to keep ourselves on a spiritual platform. I'm saying this, and at the same time, I'm very afraid in my mind. What if this happens with me? Krishna goes to such an extent, he says, if somebody urinates on you, you should tolerate it. It's very difficult for us to tolerate if somebody spits at us. It's very difficult to tolerate for us if somebody says something bad about us. It's so difficult for us to tolerate if we hear that somebody dared to say something bad about us 3 years back. What to speak about doing this at the moment? But Krishna says, no, if somebody comes to you and urinates on you, you say, yes, thank you very much. I'm very grateful to you. And the commentators of this verse, they say, throughout the history, many of the above mentioned inconveniences have been experienced by devotees of the Lord. One who is advanced in God consciousness does not allow himself to become obsessed with the material body, even in such conditions, but rather keeps his mind fixed on the spiritual platform through proper intelligence. Sometimes we even wonder why spiritual people experience so many bad things. Jesus Christ was crucified. Haridas Thakur was beaten on 22 marketplaces, and so many examples of this, so many examples. Ramanujacharya has to flee from Sri Rangam, and Kuresh, his disciple, was experienced of pain of being deprived of his eyes. His eyes were plucked out by the infidel king Krimikanta, and so many other things. Sometimes we have a very false understanding of spiritual life, that the spiritual life has to be, very nice and very beautiful, and the cakes should be every day, and Mahaprasadam plate should be there, and this is the sum and substance of spiritual life, to eat sweet prasadam or something like this. Many of us have these unrealistic ideas and understanding. Krishna says, no, welcome to spiritual life. If you want to experience the real taste, spiritual taste, be prepared. Be prepared to the tests, to sufferings, to difficult situations. Be prepared that people will betray you, that the people will blame you for something which you have not been doing. Be prepared that people will blaspheme you, will prepare. And then, this is, we can very much experience this nowadays. The internet is there, and all the sites are there, and all our detractors are there, and they blaspheme everyone. And, the beautiful magazine is there, Back to Srila Prabhupada, and you just read it, and you will know everything about everyone, and everyone will be revealed his faults. So he says this, and when Uddhava hears this, he becomes stunned. Even Uddhava didn't like to hear this. What to speak about us? Nobody likes to hear this. Nobody really likes to experience, what to speak of, having the first-hand experience of this. Even by witnessing this, what is going on with other devotees, we become really morose and afraid. Sometimes we see the sufferings of other devotees undergoing, and it's almost impossible for us to understand why it's going on like this. Why? But Krishna says that this is actually necessary for us to slacken the grip of our false identity. As I said, the false identity has a very strong grip, and it doesn't really let us out. And therefore, Lord Krishna says, Atmanatmanam udharet. One has to free oneself from the mind by the mind. One has to free oneself from this false identity by the mind, by the force of the mind, by trying to really understand that the cause of this suffering is not other people, but our attachment to the mind itself. Ultimately, all these bad experiences, which everyone has, inevitably, everyone in this material world will have to go through sufferings to one extent or another. It doesn't have to be drastic, but sometimes, ultimately, we do experience a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, mental suffering, agonies, relationship problems, all this kind of stuff, this pandemic things and everything else. Ultimately, this everything is necessary for us to disidentify with the mind, to understand that the suffering is taking place with the mind. And the suffering caused or inflicted by other people is not within our control. Other people will act as much as they, the way they will act, but our reaction to all these sufferings is within our control. So and for that, Lord Krishna, by answering the Uddhava's question, how is that possible? How is that possible? Please tell me, how is that possible to go through this? Uddhava says, so best of all speakers, please explain to me how I may properly understand this. O soul of the universe, the conditioning of one's personality in material life is very strong, and therefore it's very difficult even for a learned man to tolerate the offenses committed against them by ignorant people. Only your devotees who are fixed in your loving service and who have achieved peace by residing at your lotus feet are able to tolerate such offenses. And Krishna, listening to what Uddhava says, he says, no, you're wrong, Uddhava. Even my devotees, they also suffer when somebody insults them. He says, no, there is no exception to this rule. If somebody insults, Krishna gives in the next chapter, by beginning, before telling the story of Avanti Brahmana, Krishna says that, the sharp words are more difficult to tolerate than the sharp arrows. Because sharp arrows, when they pierce your heart, they inflict pain, but this pain is short-lived. It may be there for 1-2 days, 1-2 months, but the pain inflicted by the sharp words, insulting words of other people, will be there for years. The agony, the mental agony, can be there for years. The pain of it. Krishna says everyone without exception, is when he's insulted, it's very difficult for him. But what to do? What to do for that? Krishna, he starts explaining this story of Avanti Brahmana. And the story of Avanti Brahmana is a very, how shall I say it, is a very sobering sort of experience. While reading this story, as much as any other story of Srimad Bhagavatam, we try to experience this story. If we read it from the very distance perspective, it will not really help us. We have to relive the same story, reenact the same story within our life. So we all probably know the story that there was a Brahmana who was very stingy, greedy, and not a very good character, not at all. Everyone hated him. He was so stingy that he couldn't even, he was wealthy, but he couldn't enjoy himself. He wouldn't spend money for himself. He was just, miserly, and he was suffering, and ultimately he lost all his wealth, and everyone just rejected him, and he accepted sannyas. This is how you accept sannyas. And then he started wandering in the world, and exactly the same thing happened with him, which Krishna said to Uddhava. He was driven away from his home by the relatives because relatives hated him, and he was beaten by people. He was begging, and sometimes people would give him something, and but oftentimes people would just mock at him and would say, you are pretender, you put all this red clothes, and ultimately you're sense enjoyer, and they would spat at him and would spit at him and would, urinate at him, and sometimes would chain him with the chains and do all kinds of things. And and during all these experiences, what he was saying what he said there in the verse which we read. Everything is happening within the mind. I shouldn't blame others. I shouldn't blame. He basically said whom we should not blame. He said we should not blame other people. In the verse 42, he gave the list of who we should not consider ourselves to be a victim of. We should not, these people are not the cause of my happiness and distress. So other people are not the cause of my happiness or distress. I am not the victim of these people. Neither the demigods, no, not the demigods which are sending rain or sending heat, like now in India. They are not the cause of my suffering. Nor my own body. I should not blame my body. Not the planets, not even my karma, nor the providence. My past work, no. My past work has nothing to do with it. No time. Amazing, isn't it? Because we usually say that this is, if it's not other people, then it's karma work. He says, no, no, no. Don't blame your karma either. Don't blame time. Don't blame planets. Don't blame your body. Rather, it is the mind alone that causes happiness and distress and perpetuates the rotation of material life. So as soon as we're trying to put the blame of something which is not really the cause is this, identification with the mind. Because I identify with the mind, whatever is happening with the mind becomes mine experience. And if I want to get free from this, I should find the real cause. The real cause is this connection with the mind, and I should weaken this connection with the mind. I should use these opportunities, all these events in my life, all these happenings, everything which is basically happening within my life, I should use as an opportunity to slacken the connection with the mind. I am not this mind. And therefore, I should try to tolerate, and because it's very difficult to start tolerating with the pain, try to tolerate your happiness first. Try not to identify with the comfortable situation which is there, with the happiness of the mind, because by doing this, whatever emotion is there in the mind, if you identify with this, it only, as I said, and I will repeat it again and again and again, will reinforce your false identity. Sometimes I deal with the very concrete case stories. It may sound like a theory, but it's not a theory. It's a very relevant and practical philosophy. Sometimes we can, I have to deal with my own problems, of course, with the events which are taking place within my mind, and difficult to tolerate. But luckily I have the advantage of watching from outside of what is happening in the minds of other people. And I can say with all assurance that what is happening in my mind is nothing in comparison with what is happening in the minds of other people. It's difficult to tolerate what is going on here, but what people are going through, if you really get into it, into their mental conditioning, and how tightly they identify with all these emotions which are going on, it's just impossible. And sometimes, sometimes I cry. I have to confess to you. Sometimes I have to cry because I see that people are suffering, and at the same time I see that all these sufferings are self-inflicted, completely, absolutely, from beginning to end, self-inflicted, inflicted by the mind, and they are just playing along with the mind. They just really exactly what Avanti Brahmana is saying here in these words, exactly is going on in everyone's life. But because we see everything through this lens of the mind, we don't see we don't, it's very difficult for us to witness it from the neutral point of view. Just recently, I experienced some example to make it more vivid or more concrete. There was, like there was one person, one devotee, and he has some difficulties in relationship, in a very important relationship in his life, the most important relationship, let us say, and is experiencing, immense difficulties because, and he always says that, that this person, I want to love him and I do something, but he's so cruel to me, and it just doesn't work, and it's always, I get so much, and he always puts the blame on another person, even indirectly. He sometimes says, no, of course it's me, I am wrong, I'm wrongdoer, but it's basically the same song. Unfortunately, not the song of Avanti Brahman, a completely different song. The song of a conditioned soul is being sang. This is so bad, this is so bad, and he is so conditioned. But what really happened in this particular case, he had a very deep and trauma in his childhood, very traumatic childhood, with very emotional parents who were quite unpredictable in his life. And, they more or less programmed him for the better relationship, more or less installed in him very strong program for this, wrong expectation. He always, when he enters into some relationship, especially if this is the relationship with some authority figures, somebody who's very important, he immediately starts transferring all this experience of the past and he expects already this. He already expects that this person will behave in a certain way with him, and whatever this person tells him or does with him, he interprets in a certain way through the lens of these expectations. And this person, I know both of them very well. The person with whom he has difficulties, he's a very kind person, he's a very loving person, very caring person. But every little word said by this person to the devotee whom I'm describing is being reinterpreted by him in terms of his false identity, in terms of the program of his false ego. And he already knows, I'm the victim, I'm the sufferer, I will suffer. And how I will suffer? I will suffer from all these people. And, he enters into this relationship, he needs it, and he programs this relationship completely whimsically in such a way that whatever is coming from this person to him, being filtered through the lens of his false ego or through the lens of his mind, only reinforces this, only confirms these expectations. This is how karma works, and he just cannot break through this. He cannot look objectively into this. So what's happening with him? Again, to make it more vivid and more understandable and perhaps more practical, more applicable to our own mind. I was trying to explain to him how the emotions are self-perpetuating. He has particular he has an emotional lens within the mind. As I said, this is the part of our false identity, the experiences which we have in the mind. We attach to this experience. We attach to a particular type of experience. We attach to particular qualities which we have, and we attach to being the doer. So this is three aspects of the mind. So we have these emotions which we are experiencing all the time, and if nothing from the outside world confirms with this emotion, we will reinterpret reality. That's what people are doing on a daily basis. They take the reality, filter it through the lens of false ego, completely reinterpret the reality in terms of the false ego, and, you know, voila, here you are. The reality confirms your false ego. Yeah, I'm right. Yes, I'm right. The world is like this. The world is bad. The world is this. The world is that. You know, and it only everything which we experience in the world becomes the wood, the firewood, to make stronger the fire of our sufferings, mental sufferings. It just we take it and put it there in this fire which is already there. Amazing. We turn everything which is there into this fire because we are on fire, and everything becomes the firewood for this fire of our mental agonies and sufferings. So what's happening, coming back to the story, you know, for some time I was trying to kind of mediate and try to understand, and because the person is very intelligent, this devotee is very intelligent and introspective, and he was trying to understand what's going on, and he was, you know, to a certain extent was understanding, and, you know, there was very nice and productive meeting, and few very productive meetings or steps towards this authority figure in his life. Actually, it's his spiritual master, as I said. But in any case, so there was a very good, good meetings, and was very good progress. And I was so happy that it's going on, that something, you know, maybe he will break free from this vicious circle which is inflicted. But as soon as this was finished, as soon as this was finished, and again they distanced, the mind started working. The mind again started his song. Oh yeah, no, that cannot be, that cannot be, no. And the mind started picking up different words in these meetings, which he didn't even notice. Oh, he said this. Oh, he said this. Oh, that means this and this. And within just a few days, very short period of time, the whole result of this seemingly successful reestablishing relationship, binding, you know, rebinding meeting was completely smashed by the mind. Everything was eradicated, and one again becomes the sufferer. The same emotions came back, and with the new force started raging there, and, you know, it's and basically in one sense, this person, again, he's a very nice person. He doesn't blame others. He says, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so bad, I'm bad, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, absolutely hopeless, no hope in this life, maybe next life, or maybe in 2 lives, or in 3 lives, maybe if my parents will be better, maybe this, maybe that. Nothing will happen. Even if your parents are the best parents in the world, even if you're born to Nanda and Yashoda, of course it will not happen, but still you will have this victim mentality within yourself. You will find some problems in this relationship as well. It may be difficult to imagine, but, you know, the mind is extremely capable of doing impossible possible. He can do it, no problem. The mind is like this if we take it seriously. And this victim mentality is there. This victim mentality is there because when we are identifying with the mind, we basically, you know, as I said, being the victim is the best way to attract sympathy. You know, when we're a little child, today I experienced this. I will confess to you because, you know, to get rid of this, of some bad things, you have to confess to everyone. Today, monkey attacked me. The monkey, you know, from back jumped on me and scratched my stomach. And I mean, it was not so bad. There was some little blood was there, but not so bad. But I really noticed how I thought, oh my goodness, I'm a victim. I have to show it to everyone else. They have to see how I suffered. They have to really, say that, express sympathy as much as the child. The child, he uses all this so-called sufferings. Even if there is no suffering, he invents sufferings just to attract attention. And the same thing is going on with the mind. The same game with the mind, within the mind is going on, this victim mentality. And then we blame others, and we, of course, we find enough reasons, serious enough reasons. What happens in this case, when we have this very strong connection with the mind, when the mind is conditioned in such a way, then the intelligence becomes the slave of the mind. The intelligence starts working for the mind. The mind has this perception. Like I said, if somebody is a very fearful person, and there is absolutely no reasons in the environment to fear, the intelligence will find the reasons. Because the intelligence, being the slave of the mind, will invent something. I also deal with such cases on a regular basis. There is absolutely no reason to fear, but the fear is there. How to rationalize the fear? The intelligence starts working, starts rationalizing the fear. Perhaps I'm fearful because of this, or because of that, or because of this, or because of that. In the same way, we're suffering. We experience suffering because of the strong connection with the strong identification with the mind. We feel this suffering, and our intelligence immediately starts working. Who is to be blamed? Somebody else to be blamed. And as Avanti Brahmana says, no, please don't blame anyone. Nobody, it's only going on within your mind. It's only going on within your mind. It's in the same way as you bite your tongue or you bite your lip. Who is to be blamed? I mean, you shouldn't blame anyone. You just bit your tongue. Okay, fine. If you make a drama out of it and try to find who is who and this and that, it will not help. It will not help. The sooner you forget about this. So what happens, which is the most important thing which I want to say, and I will, bring this talk to a close soon. What happens is that when we identify too much with the mind, with all these events, we ruminate. We become completely self-centered. In this condition, it's not possible to think about Krishna. It's not possible to think about anyone else. It's actually the trick of the false ego to put us back in the center. This is how the mind works. The mind works always. He wants to put us in the center, and he does it through all these mental tricks and things like this. It doesn't help because it keeps us bound to this world, bound to this false identity, bound to this body, bound to this mind, bound. As soon as we start blaming anyone, we should know what we are doing. We are perpetuating our sufferings in this material world. Nothing else. Willingly. Self-inflicted sufferings. As much as, this whole thing which I explained, I didn't explain in details, but I was myself amazed how the person, without any reason in reality, is suffering. Why? Because of the mind, because of the identification of the mind, because of this game of the mind, perpetual game of the mind. So this victimization, this mentality of the victim, the feeling that I am the victim, then somebody is inflicted pain on us. Who is that? It's the identification of the mind. And if you do it, if you prefer, you have to be very clear. You have to be extremely clear. I want to do it. Then do it. If you're ready to face the consequences, do it. No problem. All blessings are there. The Lord is giving you blessings. He created the whole world for you to suffer because you want to do it. But if you don't want to do it, then also make the same determination within your mind. I don't want to do it. I don't want to blame anyone else. I will tolerate whatever will happen with me. I will tolerate, I will try to objectively look into what is happening in the mind from the objective point of view, not from subjective point of view. It's not me who is suffering, the mind is suffering. It's difficult. It's very difficult. Therefore, we should really, as I said, start doing it in the conditions which are more or less nice and conducive. At this point, we should start looking objectively in what is going on in the mind. Try not to identify with the mind, but to distance ourselves from the mind and from everything which is going on the stage of the mind. This is exactly the point which Krishna is making. And in this way, we ultimately will be able to transfer our consciousness from the miserable identification with this material world and material body into the blissful identification with the spiritual world and the spiritual body. We will turn our consciousness 180 degrees. We will withdraw our consciousness from this world and will be able to place our consciousness into the spiritual world. Whereas if we fall prey of this game of the mind, we will only concentrate on ourselves. As I said, there will be rumination, this false ego rumination. I. iPhone, iPad, iTunes, all this I mentality, I generation, all this I problems, I in mind, I in mind. It's not by chance this iPhone is called iPhone. It's my identity. There is a new phobia nowadays. It's already classified in the list of the disease. Nomophobia. Nomophobia means no mobile phone phobia. The fear to lose one's mobile phone because it's my identity. And in the same way as we attach to the mobile phone and all happenings in the Facebook and all this kind of stuff, in the same way we're attached to our mind. And the more we attach, the more we suffer. So that's the most important thing. We have to be really clear what I want. And if you want to go to Krishna, it's very clear what you should do. You should tolerate what is going on in the mind. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Matra sparsastu kauntaya shitoshna sukha dukkha daha. Agamapayano nityas tamsti tikshaso bharata. Be tolerant. Tolerate. Just tolerate. Tamsti tikshaso bharata. Some things you cannot really avoid. You cannot avoid, threefold miseries of this life. They will be there. Very mercifully, Krishna placed all these threefold miseries. You will suffer from your body. You will suffer from the agonies of your mind. You will suffer from other people. You will suffer from natural calamities, from coronavirus and all other stuff. It will take place. It will happen. But everything which we experience in our life is just a golden opportunity to train our tolerance, to train this quality. Trinadapi sunchina taroreva sahishnuna. Sahishnuna, it's this word sahishnuna is coming from sahasa. Sahasa means ability to tolerate, or the strength of the mind. Actually, the strength of the mind, if the mind is really strong, means healthy, it means, we will be able to tolerate. Of course, we are not talking about the mind, we are talking about the soul, the ability of the soul to distance itself from this. So the last thing which I want to say, because it's already late, I actually didn't ask the organizers for how long I'm supposed to talk, but I don't want to go too much longer. So the last thing which I wanted to say is the benefit of this way of action. If we really try to train ourselves